Her trembling fingers clutched his sleeve like a lifeline. Silver hair disheveled, pearls askew, face streaked with panic. She looked like a woman running from death itself. "William, please, they're beating my maid. They are going to end her life." The room froze. Crystal wine glasses stopped mid-clink. Conversations died on wealthy lips. Every eye in the crimson velvet turned to witness the impossible. Because the woman begging for mercy hadn't chosen just anyone. She had thrown herself at the feet of Birmingham's most dangerous man. William Morgan, the Mafia boss whose very name made grown men cross the street. And what he did next would shatter everything Birmingham thought they knew about the man with the lion tattooed over his heart. Stay with me until the end, because this story will leave you speechless. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. It's a cold November evening in Birmingham's elite district, 2019. The Crimson Velvet restaurant glowed with amber chandelier light and the quiet hum of power being exchanged over aged whiskey and bloodline connections. This wasn't a place where ordinary people dined. This was William Morgan's kingdom. Every waiter knew to serve silently and remember nothing. Every patron understood the unspoken code. You spoke in hushed tones. You showed respect. And under no circumstances did you ever cause a disruption. William Morgan sat in his customary corner booth, an imposing figure whose presence commanded absolute authority. At 38, he had built an empire that controlled 3 counties. His dark eyes saw through lies before they were spoken. His word ended arguments. His silence ended lives. Tonight, like every Tuesday for the past decade, he was conducting his weekly territory review with his inner circle. The conversation moved with cold efficiency. Shipments were tracked, territories were secured, problems were eliminated with surgical precision. This was how William operated. Methodical, unemotional, calculated. He had survived longer than most in this world because he understood one fundamental truth. Sentiment was weakness, and weakness got you buried. But then something happened that would crack the iron walls William had spent 20 years building around his soul. The restaurant's heavy oak doors exploded inward with such violence they slammed against the walls. Every head whipped toward the sound. Hushed conversations shattered mid-sentence. The maitre d' rushed forward, face drained of color, hands raised in horrified apology. But before he could intercept the intruder, the entire room saw what had caused the chaos. An elderly woman stood trembling in the doorway. Her black velvet dress, clearly expensive, was wrinkled and twisted. Her pearl necklace hung crooked. Her silver hair fell loose from what had been an elegant updo. Terror had carved deep lines into her aristocratic face. She looked like she had fled through hell to reach this place. The woman's desperate eyes swept across the room, searching, pleading, hunting for someone who could stop what was happening. The restaurant's elite patrons stared back in shock. Some averted their gaze, uncomfortable with the raw emotion on display. Others whispered irritably, annoyed that their private dealings had been interrupted by what they assumed was some delusional old woman having a breakdown. But Lisa Phillips wasn't delusional. She was fighting for someone's life. Her gaze locked onto William Morgan's table, and something in those terrified eyes recognized exactly what she was looking at. Perhaps it was the way his men sat like coiled weapons waiting for his signal. Perhaps it was the expensive cut of his suit, or the lion tattoo visible at his collar. Or perhaps it was something older, deeper, a memory from decades past when William had once quietly helped her late husband survive a business war no one else knew about. Without hesitation, she ran straight toward him. The entire restaurant held its breath. William's lieutenants tensed, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. This was unprecedented. No one approached William Morgan uninvited. Certainly not like this. Desperate. Crying. Unannounced. But before anyone could move, Lisa Phillips reached William's table and grabbed his sleeve with both trembling hands. Her fingers, adorned with rings that spoke of old money and older grief, clutched the fabric as though it were the only thing keeping her tethered to sanity. And then she spoke the words that would haunt William Morgan's carefully controlled world. "William, they're beating my maid. Anna's dying. And I don't know what to do." Her voice cracked on the last word. The lion-tattooed Mafia boss, who had buried emotion alongside his sister 20 years ago, felt something inside his chest shift. Something he thought was long dead. For the first time in a decade, William Morgan's cold mask slipped. William's jaw tightened. His men watched him carefully, waiting for the dismissal they expected, but it didn't come, because 20 years ago, William Morgan had heard words like these before. Different voice, different victim. Same desperate plea for help that arrived minutes too late. His little sister Millie's face flashed in his mind, bruised, broken, bleeding on a Birmingham slum floor, while debt collectors fled into the night. He had built an empire on one promise since that day. Never again. "Tony," William said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command. "Get the car." Tony hesitated for only a heartbeat, long enough to register the shock rippling through the room, before nodding sharply and disappearing through the back exit. William stood, and every man at his table instinctively straightened. He placed one steady hand on Lisa's trembling shoulder, guiding her away from the gawking crowd and through a door marked "Private" in discreet gold lettering. The back room was all dark leather and mahogany, soundproofed walls that had heard confessions, betrayals, and final words. William lowered Lisa into a chair and poured her water from a crystal decanter. She clutched the glass with both shaking hands. "Start from the beginning," William said, his tone low and controlled. "Every detail. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Just tell me what happened." Lisa's breath hitched as she nodded, tears streaming freely now. "It was just after 7 o'clock. Anna was helping me with dinner when we heard the front door. It exploded inward. The lock, the hinges, everything shattered." Her voice cracked. William waited. 3 men. Big men. They wore dark clothes, covered their faces with bandanas. One of them grabbed me by the arm and demanded I pay what my husband owed. She looked up at William desperately. "But Richard's been dead for 6 years. He never mentioned debts. He never—" "What name did they give?" William interrupted gently. "Garrick." Lisa's fingers tightened around the glass. "They said Richard owed money to someone named Garrick." "I've never heard that name in my life, William. I swear." William's jaw clenched imperceptibly. Garrick. The name dragged something cold and dark from the depths of his memory. "Anna tried to stop them," Lisa continued, her voice barely a whisper now. "She stepped between me and the man holding my arm. She told them to leave, and he hit her. Just struck her across the face so hard she fell. When she tried to get up, Lisa couldn't finish. Sobs racked her fragile frame. William knelt beside her chair, a gesture so uncharacteristic that if his men had seen it, they would have questioned reality itself. "Lisa, look at me." She did, eyes red and swollen. You did the right thing coming here, William said, his voice carrying a rare gentleness that felt foreign even to him. Anna is going to be all right. I promise you that. But even as he spoke those words, William's mind had already traveled backward, 23 years into the past, to a cramped Birmingham flat that smelled of mildew and broken promises. He was 15. Millie was 9. Their father owed money to a local crew, money he'd gambled away and then lied about. William had been out running errands, trying to scrape together enough for groceries, when the men came. He heard Millie's screams from 2 blocks away. He ran faster than he'd ever run in his life, lungs burning, heart hammering against his ribs like it might explode. But when he burst through the door, the men were already gone. Millie lay on the floor, small and broken, blood pooling beneath her head. William held her as the light left her eyes. She whispered his name once, just once, and then she was gone. He swore that night, kneeling in his sister's blood, rage and grief twisting into something harder, colder, that he would never be powerless again, that no one under his protection would ever die while he stood by, helpless. Never again. William blinked, shoving the memory back into its locked vault. But Garrick's name echoed in the present now. Garrick had been a lieutenant in the same crew that killed Millie, a ghost from a world William thought he'd buried. If Garrick had resurfaced, this wasn't just about Lisa or Anna. This was personal. William stood and extended his hand to Lisa. Come, we're leaving now. She rose unsteadily, gripping his arm for support as they moved toward the exit. In the main dining room, William's lieutenants watched in stunned silence as their boss, the man who never showed mercy, never bent for anyone, escorted an elderly woman through the restaurant with his arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. One of the younger men leaned toward another and whispered, "Why is the boss helping this woman?" William's head turned sharply, dark eyes locking onto the speaker with lethal precision. The man's face drained of color instantly. No words were needed. The message was clear. Ask again, and it will be your last question. Silence fell like a guillotine. Outside, engines roared to life. 3 black SUVs pulled up in perfect formation, headlights cutting through the November fog. Tony opened the rear door of the lead vehicle. William helped Lisa inside, then slid in beside her. As the convoy lurched forward into the Birmingham night, he spoke quietly, not to Lisa, but to himself. No one lays a hand on the people under my protection. The lion was awake, and Birmingham was about to remember why. The convoy tore through Birmingham's rain-slicked streets, headlights slicing through the November fog like knives. William sat rigid beside Lisa, his silence more menacing than any threat he could have spoken aloud. Lisa clutched her pearl necklace, her breathing shallow and rapid. 11 minutes. That's how long it took to reach the Edgbaston estate. 11 minutes of William's mind calculating every possible scenario, every move, every counter-move, every throat that would need cutting before dawn. The SUV screeched to a halt in front of Lisa's Victorian manor, and what William saw made his blood turn to ice. The ornate front door hung off its hinges, splintered wood jutting out like broken ribs. Shattered glass glittered across the marble steps. A brass lamp lay twisted and broken near the entrance, its shade crushed beneath someone's boot. And there, smeared across the white tile just inside the doorway, was blood. "Oh, God," Lisa whispered, her voice strangled. "Oh, God, no." Her knees buckled. William caught her instantly, his arm wrapping around her waist as she collapsed against his chest. Her trembling fingers clutched at his jacket at the lion tattoo visible beneath his collar, exactly as she had in the restaurant. Desperate, terrified, clinging to the only solid thing left in her crumbling world. "I've got you," William said quietly, steadying her. "Stay behind me." Tony and 4 other men were already out of the vehicles, weapons drawn, moving toward the entrance with the fluid precision of soldiers who'd done this 100 times before. William guided Lisa to the second SUV and handed her off to Marco, his most trusted driver. "Keep her safe," William ordered. "Anyone comes near this car, you know what to do." Marco nodded grimly, hand resting on his concealed weapon. William turned and strode toward the shattered entrance, his expensive shoes crunching over broken glass. Tony met him at the threshold, face grim. "House is clear of hostiles, boss, but you need to see this." They moved inside. The foyer looked like a war zone. A crystal vase lay shattered near the staircase. Family portraits hung crooked on the walls. Furniture had been overturned, drawers emptied, cushions slashed open. This wasn't just violence. This was a search. "Kitchen," Tony said tersely. William followed him through the devastation, past overturned chairs and scattered papers, until they reached the kitchen at the back of the house. And there, crumpled beside the marble fireplace, lay Anna. The young woman's face was swollen and bruised, her lips split, dried blood crusted along her hairline. Her maid's uniform was torn at the shoulder. Her breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. William knelt beside her immediately, his movements surprisingly gentle for a man whose hands had ended so many lives. "Anna, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered weakly. Recognition flickered in her glazed eyes. "Mr. Morgan?" she whispered, voice barely audible. "You're safe now," William said, checking her pulse, rapid but present. "Help is coming. Just stay with me." Anna's hand moved weakly, trembling fingers grasping at his sleeve. Her lips moved, struggling to form words. They weren't here. For debt." William leaned closer. "What?" "The papers." Anna's eyes widened with desperate urgency despite her pain. "They kept asking, 'Where are the papers?' Mr. Phillips's study. They tore everything apart looking for—" Her eyes rolled back. Her hand went limp. "Anna!" William's voice sharpened. "Stay with me." But she'd lost consciousness. The front door burst open. Dr. Hill, a wiry man in his 60s who'd patched up half of William's crew over the years, rushed in carrying a medical bag, his face set with professional focus. "Move!" Hill barked, dropping beside Anna and immediately checking her vitals. William stood, fists clenched so tight his knuckles went white. Papers. They'd been searching for something specific. This wasn't about debt collection. It was about evidence, about leverage, about something Lisa's late husband had hidden. Tony appeared in the doorway, phone still pressed to his ear, eyes bright with predatory excitement. "Boss," he said, lowering the phone. "We got him. One of Garrick's boys. Caught him fleeing toward the old steel warehouse near Halesowen. He's secured and waiting." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. William's expression transformed. The brief flicker of humanity that had appeared when he'd comforted Lisa and knelt beside Anna vanished like smoke. What replaced it was the face Birmingham had learned to fear. Cold, calculating, murderous. The lion tattooed over his heart seemed to snarl in the dim light. "Garrick wants war?" William's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. He turned toward the door, his silhouette framed against the broken entrance. "He'll get it. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The old steel warehouse squatted on the outskirts of Helsowen like a rusted corpse. Abandoned, forgotten, perfect for the kind of conversation William Morgan intended to have. 3 SUVs rolled to a stop outside the corrugated metal structure, headlights cutting through the industrial darkness. William stepped out into the cold November air, his breath misting before him. Around him, his men moved with silent efficiency, fanning out to secure the perimeter. Tony led the way through a side entrance, the metal door screeching on broken hinges. Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of shadows and skeletal steel beams. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. The smell of rust and old oil hung thick in the air. In the center of the space, illuminated by a single hanging work light, sat a man tied to a metal chair. He was maybe 30, thick-necked and heavy-shouldered, the kind of muscle Garrick hired for intimidation rather than intelligence. His face was already bruised. Tony's boys had clearly been persuasive during the capture. Blood trickled from his split lip. His eyes darted wildly as William's footsteps echoed across the concrete floor. William approached slowly, deliberately, each footfall measured and unhurried. He didn't need to rush. The man wasn't going anywhere. Tony positioned himself to the left, arms crossed. 2 more men flanked the right side. William stopped directly in front of the captive, close enough that the man had to crane his neck to meet his gaze. "What's your name?" William asked. His voice was quiet, conversational, almost gentle, which made it absolutely terrifying. The man's jaw clenched. "I don't—" "Let me rephrase," William interrupted smoothly, pulling a chair from the shadows and sitting down so they were eye level. "You're going to tell me your name. Then you're going to tell me who sent you to Lisa Phillips's home. Then you're going to tell me exactly what you were looking for. And if you lie to me, even once—" William leaned forward slightly, the lion tattoo visible at his open collar. "Well, let's just say Tony here gets creative when people waste my time." The man swallowed hard. Danny Rourke." "Good. See how easy that was?" William's tone remained calm, almost friendly. "Now, Danny, who sent you to Edgbaston tonight?" Danny's eyes flickered to Tony, then back to William. "I want a deal. Protection. I tell you what I know, you let me walk." William tilted his head slightly, as if considering. "No." The single word landed like a hammer. "But," William continued, "if you cooperate fully, I'll make it quick. If you don't—" He gestured vaguely to Tony. "We have all night, and Tony hasn't had a chance to work in weeks. He gets bored." Tony cracked his knuckles meaningfully. Danny's resistance crumbled. "Garrick, okay? Garrick sent us. He said the old woman had something that belonged to him, said we needed to get it back tonight, no matter what." "What was it?" "Papers, documents, something her dead husband was holding. Garrick didn't tell us exactly what, just said they were in the study, hidden somewhere. We were supposed to find them and get out." William's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his dark eyes. "And the debt you mentioned? The money Lisa supposedly owed?" Danny shook his head frantically. "Fake, completely made up. Just a story to scare her into cooperating. Her husband never owed nothing to nobody. This was never about money." "Then what was it about?" "I don't know, man. I swear. Garrick just said if the maid or the old lady found those papers first, we'd all be dead. He was paranoid as hell about it." William stood slowly, hands in his pockets, pacing a small circle around the chair. "Tell me about these papers, Danny. What do they prove?" "I told you I don't—" "Guess." Danny's breath came faster. "Look, I heard rumors, all right? Just rumors. That Garrick's been running a laundering operation through some offshore accounts. Real sophisticated stuff. And that the old woman's husband, Phillips, he was an accountant or something back in the day. Maybe he knew too much. Maybe he kept records. William stopped pacing. And Garrick wants them back before anyone else sees them. Especially before you see them, Danny blurted, then immediately looked like he regretted it. William's eyebrow raised fractionally. Before me? Danny's face went pale. Garrick, he didn't know the old woman would run to you. Nobody knew. When we got back and told him what happened, that she'd gone to the Crimson Velvet, he lost his mind, started screaming about how we'd just painted targets on all our backs. He looked up at William with genuine terror. We didn't know it was you she'd run to. If we'd known you were involved, we never would have touched that house. I swear on my mother, Mr. Morgan, we didn't know. Silence filled the warehouse. William's men exchanged significant glances. This changed everything. The attack on Lisa wasn't random violence or mistaken identity. This was a calculated move against someone Garrick believed was isolated and vulnerable. He'd miscalculated catastrophically. William crouched down so he was eye level with Danny again. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, and infinitely more dangerous because of it. Here's what's going to happen, Danny. You're going to give Tony every single detail about Garrick's operation. Locations, associates, schedules, bank accounts, everything. And if your information checks out... William stood. You get to walk out of Birmingham alive. But if I find out you've lied or held anything back, I will find you. Do we understand each other? Danny nodded so violently his chair rattled. Yes, sir. I'll tell you everything. William turned to Tony. Get everything he knows. Record it. And when you're done... He looked around the warehouse, the rusted walls, the broken windows, the oil-stained floor. Burn it down. Tony grinned darkly. The whole thing? The whole thing, William confirmed. Already walking toward the exit, let Garrick see the smoke from wherever he's hiding. Let him know I'm coming. As William stepped out into the cold night air, his phone buzzed. Dr. Hill. Anna's stable, Hill's voice came through. Severe concussion, 3 cracked ribs, extensive bruising, but she'll live. Good, William said quietly. Keep her sedated and guarded. No one gets near her. He ended the call and slid into the waiting SUV. Through the rearview mirror, he watched as flames began to lick up the warehouse walls, orange light blooming against the darkness. Birmingham was about to learn an old lesson. You don't touch what belongs to William Morgan. Not without paying in blood. Dawn was breaking over Birmingham when William returned to Lisa's estate, the sky bleeding from black to bruised purple. The convoy pulled up quietly this time. No screeching tires, no dramatic arrival. This was surgical work now. Inside, the house had been partially restored. The broken glass swept up, the overturned furniture righted. But the violence still lingered in the air, like a ghost that refused to leave. Lisa sat in the drawing room, wrapped in a blanket despite the fire roaring in the hearth. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. She looked like she'd aged a decade in a single night. Anna? She asked immediately when William entered. Stable. Dr. Hill says she'll make a full recovery. William removed his jacket, draping it over a chair. The lion tattoo was fully visible now beneath his white shirt. But she needs rest. She won't be answering questions for at least another day. Relief flooded Lisa's face, followed immediately by fresh tears. Thank God. Thank God. William moved toward the study without waiting for an invitation. Before she lost consciousness, Anna said something. About papers. About your husband's study. Lisa followed him shakily. Richard's study? But there's nothing in there except old ledgers and... Where exactly did Anna say she found something? William interrupted, already scanning the wood-paneled room. Bookshelves lined 3 walls. An antique mahogany desk dominated the center, its surface cleared of everything except a brass lamp and a leather writing pad. The ransacking was evident here too. Drawers hung open, books pulled from shelves, cushions on the reading chair slashed open. "She didn't," Lisa said weakly. She was cleaning in here yesterday afternoon. She mentioned finding some loose paneling behind the desk. But I didn't think anything of it. Old houses settle, things shift. William was already moving. He circled the desk, running his hands along the back panel, pressing, testing. His fingers found it almost immediately, a section that gave slightly under pressure, the wood flexing in a way that wasn't natural. "Tony, knife." Tony handed over a folding blade. William wedged it carefully into the seam, prying with controlled force until something clicked. The false panel swung open. Inside was a hollowed-out space, roughly 2 feet wide, and within it, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with string, sat a thick manila folder. William pulled it out carefully, as if handling a live explosive. Because in a way, he was. He untied the string and opened the folder on the desk. What he found made his blood run cold. Bank statements. Offshore account numbers from the Cayman Islands, Cyprus, Panama. Transaction records stretching back 15 years. Names, dates, amounts, millions of pounds moving through shell corporations with deliberately obscure names. And in the margins, in Richard Phillips's neat accountant's handwriting, were annotations. Notes connecting the accounts to specific individuals. To businesses that were fronts. To shipments that never appeared on any customs manifest. William flipped through page after page, his expression darkening with each revelation. Garrick's name appeared dozens of times. But it wasn't alone. There were others. Politicians, police officials, judges. A network of corruption so vast and so deeply entrenched that exposing it would topple half of Birmingham's power structure. And then William turned to the final page. His hands stopped. His breathing stopped. Because there, in a list of names from 23 years ago, a list titled Enforcement Personnel, 1996 to 2002, was a name that detonated something deep in William's chest. Marcus Razor Chen, Collections, South Birmingham Territory. The man who'd killed Millie. The debt collector who'd beaten a 9-year-old girl to death over money her father never actually owed. William had spent years hunting for that name. Years following cold trails and dead ends. He'd assumed Chen had fled the country or died in some gutter somewhere. But here it was. Proof that Chen had been working for Garrick's predecessor. That the attack on William's family hadn't been random street violence. It had been part of this same corrupt machine. The folder crumpled slightly in William's tightening grip. "William?" Lisa's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What is it? What did you find?" He couldn't answer immediately. Rage, pure, molten, 23 years in the making, surged through his veins like poison. His jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. The lion tattoo seemed to pulse with his hammering heartbeat. "William, you're scaring me," Lisa whispered. He forced himself to breathe, to think, to focus. "Your husband," William said, his voice dangerously quiet, "was an accountant?" "Yes, for several firms over the years, but he retired 15 years ago after his heart surgery. He never mentioned—" "He kept records," William interrupted, still staring at the papers. "Records of criminal activity he either witnessed or was asked to facilitate. Money laundering, bribery, connections between organized crime and legitimate businesses." Lisa sank into the reading chair, face pale. "I don't understand. Richard was a good man. He would never—" "He documented it," William said, finally looking up at her. Which means either he was part of it and kept insurance, or he discovered it and couldn't report it safely. Either way, he hid the evidence where no one would find it. Until Anna did, Tony added grimly from the doorway. William nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. Garrick found out somehow. Maybe someone who knew Richard kept records. Maybe Richard tried to leverage them before he died. But Garrick knew these documents existed, knew they were hidden somewhere in this house, and knew they could destroy everything he'd built. He looked at Lisa with an expression that made her shrink back slightly. That's why he targeted you. Not because of debt, not because of money. Because you were sitting on evidence that could send him and half of Birmingham's elite to prison for the rest of their lives. Lisa's hand flew to her mouth. Oh God! Anna almost died because of papers I didn't even know existed. And Garrick won't stop, Tony said. Not while these documents are out there. Not while witnesses remain. William carefully closed the folder and tucked it under his arm. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of an oath sworn in blood. Then we end this. Tonight. He turned to Lisa, and for a moment, the cold Mafia boss facade cracked, revealing something raw underneath. I failed someone once because I wasn't strong enough to protect them. I won't fail again. His hand rested briefly on her shoulder. Oh. You and Anna are under my protection now. That means no one. Not Garrick, not his associates, not God himself, touches you while I'm still breathing. Lisa nodded, tears streaming down her face. William turned to Tony. Get Marco and everyone else. I want every detail about Garrick's location within the hour. And I want these documents copied and distributed to every insurance policy I have. Lawyers, journalists, contacts in London. If something happens to me, they go public immediately. Where are you going? Tony asked. William's smile was cold and sharp as a blade. To remind Birmingham why they should have stayed afraid. By noon, every criminal enterprise in Birmingham knew. William Morgan was moving personally. The whispers started in the gambling dens of Digbeth, spread through the drug corners of Handsworth, and reached the money-laundering fronts in the city center before the sun had fully risen. Phone calls were made, meetings were canceled, shipments were delayed. Because when William Morgan went to war, the smart ones got out of the way. In a nondescript office above a betting shop in Sparkbrook, Marcus Way, one of Garrick's primary distributors, received the call that made his blood run cold. It's true, his lieutenant said, voice tight with barely controlled panic. Morgan torched the Hale Sowen warehouse last night. Danny Rourke is missing, presumed dead, and Morgan's got the documents. Way's hand trembled as he set down his coffee. All of them? Everything Phillips kept. Bank accounts, names, transaction histories, everything. Jesus Christ. Way stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. We need to move. Now. Get everyone out of the primary locations. Shut down operations for the next 48 hours. Tell everyone to go dark. What about Garrick? Garrick's a dead man, Way said bluntly. He just doesn't know it yet. 20 miles away, in a fortified penthouse in the mailbox district, Vincent Garrick paced like a caged animal. He was 52, silver-haired, expensively dressed, the kind of criminal who'd successfully laundered his reputation into respectability. Property developer, philanthropist, member of 2 charity boards. But right now, he looked like what he truly was, a cornered rat. Double the security, he barked at his head of operations. I want men on every entrance, every exit, every stairwell. I want scouts on Morgan's restaurant, his warehouse, his known properties. I want to know where he is every second of every day. Sir, with respect, his lieutenant said carefully. Maybe we should consider alternative options. Leave the city for a while. Let things cool down. Garrick whirled on him. Run? You think I've built this empire by running every time some thug with a tattoo gets upset? Morgan's dangerous, but he's not invincible. We find him first. We hit him hard, and we end this before it gets out of control. But his voice lacked conviction, because Vincent Garrick knew exactly what William Morgan was capable of. He'd heard the stories, he'd seen the bodies, and he'd made the catastrophic mistake of attacking someone Morgan cared about. At Birmingham's private St. Mary's Medical Center, Lisa Phillips sat beside Anna's hospital bed, holding the young woman's hand as if letting go might cause her to disappear. Anna had survived the emergency surgery. 3 cracked ribs had been stabilized. The swelling in her brain had been managed. But her face was still a canvas of purple and yellow bruises, her lips stitched, her left eye swollen shut. I'm so sorry, Lisa whispered for perhaps the 100th time. Anna, I'm so sorry. This should never have happened. If I'd known about those papers, if I'd just... Mrs. Phillips. Anna's voice was hoarse but firm. Please, stop. But you were hurt because of me, because of what Richard hid, because I didn't... You didn't know. Anna interrupted gently, squeezing Lisa's hand with what little strength she had. Neither of us did. This isn't your fault. Lisa's tears fell freely onto their joined hands. The door opened quietly. Both women looked up to find William Morgan standing in the doorway, still dressed in the same white shirt and dark trousers from the night before. He looked like he hadn't slept, because he hadn't, but his eyes were alert, watchful, dangerous. Anna's remaining good eye widened, and then, inexplicably, she began to cry. Mr. Morgan, she whispered, her voice breaking. You came. William crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside her bed, the same gesture of care he'd shown when he'd found her bleeding on Lisa's kitchen floor. Of course I came, he said quietly. How are you feeling? Alive, Anna managed, tears streaming down her bruised cheeks. Because of you. If you hadn't come when Mrs. Phillips asked, if you hadn't gotten Dr. Hill there so fast, they said I would have... But you didn't, William interrupted gently. You're here. You're safe. And you're going to recover. Anna nodded, unable to speak through her tears. William reached out and carefully, so carefully, placed his hand over hers. Anna, I need you to understand something. What happened to you wasn't your fault. You did exactly what you should have done. You tried to protect someone you cared about. That takes courage most people will never have. They thought Mrs. Phillips knew, Anna whispered, her voice trembling. About the papers. They kept asking where they were, but she didn't know. She really didn't know. I just tried to stop them from hurting her. That's all I wanted. William's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I know. I wasn't brave, Anna continued, shaking her head weakly. I was terrified. You were brave, William corrected firmly. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. You stood between a threat and someone you loved. That's the definition of courage. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to something cold and absolute. You were brave, Anna. Now let me be brutal. Anna's breath caught. Even through her pain, she recognized the promise in those words. The vow. Lisa stood from her chair and placed a hand on William's shoulder. Thank you, she said simply, for everything. William nodded once, then stood. His phone buzzed. A text from Tony. Found him. Scrapyard Complex, Tisley. Confirmed sighting 20 minutes ago. Heavy security. Estimated 15 to 20 men. William's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something predatory. He turned back to the two women. There are 2 men outside your door. Dr. Hill is on call. You're both under armed guard until I return. No one gets near you. Understood? Where are you going? Lisa asked, though the answer was written in the set of William's shoulders. To finish this. 30 minutes later, in the private room above the crimson velvet, William stood before a table covered in blueprints, photographs, and handwritten notes. Tony, Marco, and 8 of his most trusted men surrounded him. The scrapyard, William said, pointing to an aerial photograph. Garrick's holed up in the main office building at the center. 3 entry points, 14 confirmed hostiles, possibly more. Security patrols every 20 minutes. He looked up, meeting each man's eyes in turn. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't a warning. This is an execution. We go in fast. We go in hard. And we don't stop until Garrick is dead and his operation is ash. Anyone have a problem with that? Silence. Then slow, grim nods around the table. Good. William straightened, rolling up his sleeves to reveal more of the lion tattoo that had become Birmingham's symbol of reckoning. Get the cars. Load the weapons. We move in 1 hour. As his men filed out to prepare, Tony lingered. Boss, he said carefully. This is going to make noise. Serious noise. The kind that brings attention we usually avoid. William picked up the folder of documents. Richard Phillips's insurance policy against the underworld. Let it make noise, he said quietly. Let every corrupt politician, every dirty cop, every criminal who thought they were untouchable see what happens when they come after innocent people. He looked at Tony with eyes that held 23 years of buried rage finally finding its target. Garrick wanted a war. He's going to get a reckoning. Outside, engines roared to life. Birmingham was about to learn what happened when you woke the lion. The scrapyard sprawled across 5 acres of rust and ruin on Birmingham's industrial edge. A graveyard of crushed cars, twisted metal, and forgotten machinery. Perfect cover for a man trying to hide from his sins. But there was nowhere Vincent Garrick could hide from William Morgan. 4 vehicles approached through the gathering dusk, headlights off, engines purring like hunting cats. They stopped 200 yards out, hidden behind a stack of shipping containers. William stepped out into the cold evening air, the lion tattoo visible beneath his open collar. Around him, his men checked weapons with practiced efficiency. The metallic click of magazines sliding home, the whisper of safeties being released. Tony, Marco, you take the east entrance with 4 men, William ordered, his voice calm and cold. I'll take the main gate with the rest. We move fast, we move quiet, and anyone who points a weapon at you, you put down. No warnings, no mercy. Tony nodded grimly. And Garrick? William's eyes were dead calm. Mine. They moved like shadows through the scrapyard, spreading out in practiced formation. The first sentry never saw them coming. Marco's hand clamped over his mouth, a blade between his ribs, and he was down without a sound. The second sentry managed to reach for his radio before Tony's bullet dropped him. Then all hell broke loose. Shouts erupted across the scrapyard. Men scrambled from the office building, weapons drawn. Muzzle flashes lit the gathering darkness like lightning strikes. But William's crew moved with surgical precision, each man covering the other, advancing through the maze of crushed vehicles and metal debris. Garrick's security was numerous but panicked. Hired muscle who'd never faced soldiers. William advanced through the chaos like death incarnate, his weapon barking 3 times in quick succession. 3 bodies fell. He didn't break stride. A man emerged from behind a car crusher, shotgun rising. Marco dropped him with 2 shots before he could fire. "Office building, 2nd floor," Tony shouted, pointing to a window where shadows moved frantically. "He's running!" William changed direction immediately, sprinting toward the building's rear entrance. He kicked the door off its hinges and swept inside, weapon raised. The building was old, peeling paint, flickering fluorescent lights, the smell of motor oil and desperation. William moved through it like a ghost, checking corners, clearing rooms. He found Garrick in what used to be a mechanic's shop on the ground floor. The older man stood behind a workbench cluttered with tools and parts, a pistol trembling in his hand. His expensive suit was rumpled, his silver hair disheveled, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. "Morgan," he said, and managed what might have been a laugh. "I should have known. Always the dramatic entrance." William said nothing. He simply raised his weapon, centered it on Garrick's chest, and waited. "You don't want to do this," Garrick continued, his bravado cracking at the edges. "You kill me, you start a war with everyone I'm connected to. Powerful people, William. People who can make your life very difficult. Drop the weapon." Garrick's nervous laugh came again. "Come on, we're both businessmen here. We can negotiate. Whatever those documents say, whatever you think you know, we can work something out. Money, territory, name your price." William took 2 steps forward. "Drop the weapon." The pistol clattered onto the workbench. William kicked it away without taking his eyes off Garrick. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out the folder, Richard Phillips's carefully documented evidence of corruption. "You forged a debt," William said quietly. "Used it as an excuse to break into Lisa Phillips's home." Garrick's face went pale. It was business, nothing personal. You ordered your men to beat Anna half to death. She got in the way. She wasn't supposed to be there. You were going to kill Lisa," William continued, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. "An elderly woman who'd done nothing except unknowingly possess evidence of your crimes. You were going to silence her. Permanently." Garrick backed up until he hit the wall. I was protecting my interests. You'd have done the same." "No," William said coldly. "I wouldn't have." He flipped open the folder to the final page, the list of names from 23 years ago. His finger found the entry. Marcus Razor Chen, Collections, South Birmingham Territory. "This name," William said, and now fury crept into his voice like poison. "Marcus Chen. He worked for your organization, for your predecessor." Garrick's eyes darted to the document. "That was years ago. Ancient history. He killed my sister." The words fell like stones into still water. Garrick froze. "What?" "My 9-year-old sister, Millie. Beaten to death over a fabricated debt in 1996. Marcus Chen did it, under orders from your organization." William stepped closer. Garrick could see it now, the rage that had been carefully controlled for 23 years finally breaking free. The mask cracking, the monster emerging. "I spent years looking for him," William continued, his voice shaking with suppressed violence. "Years hunting for the man who took everything from me. And here it is, proof that he worked for you." "That he was part of this," He gestured to the papers, then to Garrick. That means you're part of it too. I wasn't even running things then. Garrick's voice rose to a desperate pitch. That was before my time. I had nothing to do with your sister. But you knew, William said. You inherited this operation. You knew what it had done, and instead of changing it, instead of making amends, you perpetuated it. You attacked innocent people. You beat women. You planned murders. William's weapon rose slightly. You became exactly what they were. Morgan, please. You wanted Lisa silenced. You wanted Anna dead. You thought they were weak, vulnerable, easy targets. William's finger moved to the trigger. You forgot one thing. What? Garrick whispered. They ran to me. The first shot took Garrick in the shoulder, spinning him against the wall. He screamed, clutching the wound. The second shot shattered his knee. He collapsed, howling in agony. William stood over him, weapon steady, eyes blazing with righteous fury. That's for Anna, he said coldly. He aimed at Garrick's other knee. That's for Lisa. The shot echoed through the mechanic shop. Garrick's screams reached a fever pitch. William knelt down, pressing the barrel of his weapon against Garrick's temple. The older man sobbed, blood pooling beneath him. And this, William whispered, is for Millie. The final shot silenced everything. Outside, the scrapyard burned. William's men had set fire to the office building, the storage sheds, anything connected to Garrick's operation. Orange flames climbed into the night sky, visible for miles. Tony approached, face grim but satisfied. It's done, boss. 11 hostiles down. 3 surrendered. They're secured in the vans. We found ledgers, computers, enough evidence to connect Garrick to half the corrupt officials in Birmingham. William nodded slowly, holstering his weapon. His hands were steady, his breathing was calm. But inside, something that had been wound tight for 23 years had finally, mercifully, released. Burn it all, William said. Every file, every record that isn't evidence against his network. I want this place erased from existence. He turned back to look at the mechanic shop one last time, at the body of the man who'd ordered violence against innocent women, who'd profited from the same system that had killed Millie. Justice, William thought, wasn't always clean, but it was always necessary. Let's go home, he said quietly. Behind them, Birmingham's underworld watched the flames rise and understood the message perfectly. The lion had roared, and empires had fallen. By dawn, Vincent Garrick's criminal empire had ceased to exist. The men who'd worked for him scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Some fled Birmingham entirely. One-way tickets to Manchester, London, Glasgow, anywhere that wasn't within William Morgan's reach. Others surrendered to authorities, hoping cooperation might spare them from the lion's wrath. The smart ones simply vanished. In a quiet cafe in the Jewelry Quarter, Detective Inspector Harold Graves sat across from William Morgan, a thick manila envelope resting on the table between them like a loaded weapon. Graves was 63, gray-haired, with the weathered face of a man who'd spent 4 decades navigating Birmingham's murky waters. He was corrupt. William had owned him for the better part of 10 years, but he was also pragmatic and loyal in his own transactional way. This is everything? Graves asked, eyeing the envelope without touching it. Everything Richard Phillips documented, William confirmed, sipping his coffee calmly. Offshore accounts, money laundering operations, bribery records, names of every politician, judge, and police official on Garrick's payroll. Graves exhaled slowly. Jesus, Morgan, do you have any idea what's in here? This isn't just taking down a criminal enterprise. This is going to shake the entire city. Good, I'm serious. This goes public. Half the city council resigns. Maybe more. The press will have a feeding frenzy. Internal affairs will be investigating for years. William set down his coffee and leaned forward slightly. Harold. Those men used their positions to enable violence against innocent people. They protected operations that killed, extorted, and destroyed lives. My sister's death? It was part of this same network. He tapped the envelope. So yes, I know exactly what's in here, and I want it to burn everything they've built. Graves studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I'll make sure it reaches the right people. The clean ones, the ones who'll actually do something with it. And my name? Stays buried, Graves assured him. Anonymous source. Documents discovered during the investigation of Vincent Garrick's death. You were never here. William stood, buttoning his jacket. One more thing. Lisa Phillips and Anna Reyes. They're off limits. Forever. Anyone even thinks about approaching them, I want to know immediately. Consider it done. William dropped cash on the table for the coffee and walked out into the cold Birmingham morning. Behind him, Graves opened the envelope and began reading. By noon, warrants would be issued. By evening, arrests would be made. And by week's end, Birmingham's corrupt establishment would be in shambles. At St. Mary's Medical Center, morning light streamed through the hospital window, catching dust motes in its golden rays. Anna's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the pain registered, dull and throbbing in her ribs, sharp in her head, everywhere at once. She tried to sit up and immediately gasped. Anna, oh, Anna, don't move. Just stay still. Lisa was there instantly, leaning over the bed, tears already streaming down her face. Her hands trembled as they found Anna's, squeezing gently. Mrs. Phillips? Anna's voice was hoarse, confused. What happened? You're safe, Lisa said, her words tumbling out in a rush. You're in the hospital. You've been unconscious for almost 2 days. The doctor said you'd be all right, but I was so worried. Anna, I was so terrified. Her voice broke completely. Anna squeezed back weakly. I remember. Men. They came to the house. They were asking about papers, and I... Her eyes widened with sudden panic. They hurt you. Did they hurt you? No, no, Lisa assured her quickly, smoothing Anna's hair back from her bruised face. I'm fine. You protected me. You were so brave, Anna. So incredibly brave. I tried to stop them, Anna whispered, tears gathering in her good eye. I didn't know what else to do. They were going to hurt you, and I just... You saved my life, Lisa interrupted firmly. Don't you dare think otherwise. You stood between me and those monsters, and you paid a terrible price for it. But you're alive. Thank God you're alive. Anna began to cry, soft, painful sobs that made her ribs ache, but that she couldn't contain. I was so scared. I know you were. Lisa leaned down carefully and pressed a kiss to Anna's forehead. But it's over now. It's all over. Mr. Morgan, he took care of everything. Mr. Morgan? Anna's expression shifted to something like wonder. He really came? He came, a deep voice said from the doorway. Both women turned to see William standing there, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, though he'd clearly cleaned up. His white shirt was fresh, his dark jacket immaculate. But his eyes carried the weight of sleepless hours and hard choices. Anna's face crumpled at the sight of him. Mr. Morgan, you saved us. William stepped into the room but maintained a respectful distance, as if afraid his presence might disturb the fragile healing happening between the two women. You saved yourself, he said quietly. And you saved Lisa. I just finished what you started. Lisa stood slowly, her hand still holding Anna's. She looked at William with an expression that held grief, gratitude, and something deeper, something like understanding. She crossed the small room and took William's hand in both of hers. You didn't just save her, Lisa whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You saved me too, not just from those men, but from living in fear, from being alone, from thinking there was no justice left in this world. William looked down at their joined hands. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. When I lost my husband, Lisa continued, I thought I'd lost the last person who would ever fight for me. But you proved me wrong. You fought for us when you had no reason to, when we were nothing to you. You weren't nothing, William said quietly. We were strangers, an old woman and her maid. Why did you do it, William? Why did you risk everything? William was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because someone should have fought for my sister. Someone should have stopped what happened to her. And they didn't. His eyes met Lisa's, dark, haunted, but also somehow lighter than they'd been in years. I couldn't save Millie, but I could save you. Lisa's tears fell freely now. She squeezed his hand tighter. Then you gave her death meaning, she said softly. You turned your grief into protection for others, into justice. That's not just revenge, William. That's redemption. Something in William's chest cracked. Just slightly, just enough. The iron walls he'd built around his heart 23 years ago showed their first hairline fractures. He didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Because if he opened his mouth, emotion he'd buried for decades might come pouring out. So instead, he simply stood there, holding Lisa's hand, while across the room, Anna watched with her battered face and grateful eyes. And for the first time since he was 15 years old, William Morgan allowed himself to feel something other than rage. He felt purpose. He felt connection. He felt, perhaps, the faintest whisper of peace. Outside, Birmingham's morning traffic hummed past the hospital. The city moved on, unaware that in a quiet room on the third floor, something had fundamentally shifted in the soul of its most dangerous man. The lion had roared, the corrupt had fallen. But more importantly, far more importantly, innocence had been protected. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Lisa released William's hand slowly. Will you stay? Just for a little while? William glanced at Anna, who nodded hopefully despite her exhaustion. Yes, he said simply. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. This violent man, this feared Mafia boss, this walking nightmare of Birmingham's underworld, and kept watch over two women who'd somehow reminded him what it meant to be human. The city could wait. For now, this was enough. 3 weeks later, Lisa Phillips's estate in Edgbaston looked almost as it had before that terrible night. The front door had been replaced, solid oak with new brass fixtures that gleamed in the afternoon sun. The shattered lamps had been restored or replaced with matching antiques. Fresh paint covered the walls where violence had left its marks. The study where Richard Phillips's secrets had hidden for years now held only books and memories. but some things had changed in ways that couldn't be measured by repairs. Lisa moved through her home differently now, not with the tentative fear of someone waiting for the next disaster, but with quiet confidence. She knew she was protected. She knew she wasn't alone. And Anna, though still healing, smiled more easily than she had in years. It was a Tuesday afternoon when William's car pulled up to the estate. Not the intimidating convoy that had stormed through Birmingham 3 weeks ago, but a single vehicle. Quiet, understated. Marco opened the door, and William stepped out, dressed casually for once. Dark jeans, a simple black shirt open at the collar, the lion tattoo visible as always. He looked less like Birmingham's most feared mafia boss and more like a friend coming to visit. Lisa met him at the door, her face lighting up with genuine warmth. "William, come in, come in. Anna's been asking about you all morning." "How is she?" William asked as they walked through the restored foyer. "Stronger every day. The doctors say she'll make a full recovery. No permanent damage, thank God." Lisa paused, her hand touching William's arm gently. "Because of you." "Because you got Dr. Hill there so quickly." They found Anna in the conservatory at the back of the house, sunlight streaming through the glass walls. She sat in a cushioned chair, a blanket over her lap, reading a book. The bruises on her face had faded to yellow and green, still visible, but healing. Her stitches had been removed. She looked fragile but present. When she saw William, her entire face transformed. "Mr. Morgan!" She tried to stand, but William waved her back down gently. "Don't get up. I just came to see how you're doing." "Better," Anna said, and meant it. "So much better. Mrs. Phillips has been taking care of me like I'm made of glass." "Because you nearly were broken," Lisa said firmly, settling into the chair beside her. "And I'm allowed to worry." William took a seat across from them, and for a moment, the three of them simply existed in comfortable silence, something William hadn't experienced in longer than he could remember. "William?" Lisa said eventually, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "I need to say something. Something I've been trying to find the right words for." "Lisa, you don't need to. Please, let me." She leaned forward, her elderly hands clasped together. "What you did for us, there's no way to repay it. No amount of money, no favor, no gesture could possibly equal what you gave us. You gave us our lives, our safety, our future. You gave us justice," Anna added quietly. William shifted uncomfortably. Gratitude had always made him uneasy. It implied debt, obligation, things he'd spent years avoiding. "I did what needed to be done," he said simply. "No," Lisa insisted. "You did what most people wouldn't." "You risked everything, your safety, your reputation, your empire, for 2 women you barely knew. That's not obligation, William. That's character." Anna reached beside her chair and pulled out a small box wrapped in simple brown paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it out to William. We wanted to give you something," she said, suddenly shy. "It's not much. It doesn't come close to what you deserve. But we thought—" William took the box carefully, as if it might shatter. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing a small velvet jewelry case. Inside, resting on black silk, was a pendant, a lion's head carved in silver, suspended on a simple but elegant chain. The craftsmanship was exquisite, every detail of the mane carefully rendered, the eyes fierce and protective. William stared at it, something tightening in his chest. "To match the one over your heart," Anna whispered. "So you remember, So you remember that you're not just the lion people fear. You're the lion people can run to. William lifted the pendant from the box, the silver catching the sunlight. His hand, the same hand that had pulled triggers, broken bones, ended lives, trembled almost imperceptibly. Anna made the design, Lisa said softly. I had it commissioned from a jeweler in the city center. She insisted on the inscription on the back. William turned it over. 3 words engraved in elegant script. Protector, guardian, family. For a long moment, William couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except stare at those 3 words that represented everything he'd lost when Millie died and everything he'd somehow, impossibly, found again in a restaurant 3 weeks ago when an old woman grabbed his sleeve and begged for help. And then, slowly, William Morgan smiled. Not the cold, calculated smile he used to intimidate rivals, not the empty expression he wore like armor in business meetings, but a real smile, genuine, warm, reaching his eyes for the first time in decades. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion he didn't try to hide. This means more than you know. Lisa reached over and squeezed his hand. You're family now, William, whether you like it or not. I like it, William admitted, and meant it with every fiber of his being. He fastened the chain around his neck, the lion pendant settling just below his collar, visible beside the tattoo that had marked him as dangerous for so long. But now it meant something different. Now it meant protection. Now it meant purpose. Now it meant home. For years, Birmingham feared William Morgan. They whispered his name in dark corners and crossed the street when they saw him coming. They knew him as the man with the lion tattoo, the Mafia boss whose word was law and whose mercy was non-existent. They weren't wrong, but they weren't entirely right either. Because on a cold November night when an elderly woman burst through restaurant doors crying for help, when she grabbed his sleeve with trembling hands and begged him to save her maid, William Morgan remembered something he'd buried alongside his sister 23 years ago. He remembered what it meant to fight for something that mattered. Not territory, not money, not power, but people, the innocent, the vulnerable, the ones who had no one else to turn to. And in saving them, William discovered something unexpected. He'd saved himself too. Birmingham still feared the lion. But 2 women in Edgbaston loved him. And in the end, that made all the difference.